Hey guys, Tony here from Tony Tech Bites, and today we're building another PC build. This one's gonna be for a friend. I'm gonna go over every single step in 4K on YouTube. Well, actually, yeah, I'm filming on YouTube. I'm gonna go over every single step, including cable management, downloading drivers, as well as downloading the operating system, which in this case is Windows 10. And this time, I've learned from my mistakes. I have 2 cameras now. Thanks to all you guys for watching my videos. I was able to afford a camera during Black Friday. So yeah, hopefully there's going to be 2 different camera angles, so it's going to look a lot better. So let's first start off with the tools for this PC build. All you need to build a PC is a Phillips head screwdriver. I also have scissors just to open up the boxes. I haven't opened them up yet. As well as a keyboard, because we're going to have to test the PC, make sure that it turns on, as well as download drivers, a mouse, an HDMI cable, and a USB flash drive. In this case, I have 2 USB flash drives. One is to download Windows 10. This has the Windows 10 installer from Microsoft's website. This one has all the drivers for the motherboard. So I downloaded all the drivers onto this USB flash drive. So let's go over all the parts and the reasoning for this PC build. The case, we're using the Fantex P300A. It's an awesome case. It has a mesh front panel, pretty good radiator clearance. I haven't built in it personally, but it does look pretty promising, and it was on sale at the time of purchase. Graphics card, we have the EVGA RTX 3070 XC3 Ultra. Pretty complicated story. Actually, not really. It was just a friend of a friend that was able to get this for us. I believe if you sign up for email notifications from EVGA's website, you should be able to grab a 30 series graphics card. For the power supply, we have a Corsair CX650 80 plus bronze rated power supply. It's not the absolute best power supply, but it does have enough capacity to power all these parts. 80 plus bronze rating is alright, and the fan for this is kind of loud. But you have to keep in mind that with COVID-19 and the holiday season, most of these parts are either completely out of stock right now or pretty expensive. So can't really be choosy, and this should hopefully not let us down. For the motherboard, we got the MSI B450 Tomahawk Max. We're not trying to smash overclocking records. In fact, I'm not going to be overclocking this system, and I doubt my friend is going to be overclocking it as well if he wants me to build it for him. So this should be fine, and it has Ryzen 3000 support out of the box, so you don't really need a BIOS update first. RAM, we got Corsair 16GB of 3600 MHz Vengeance LPX sticks. These are not the absolute best RAM sticks, but yet again, we're not trying to overclock this thing to death. We just need something that's fast enough, and 3600 MHz is ideal for Ryzen 3000 series CPUs. We also got Windows 10 Home for the OS. You don't really need to pay for Windows, but I'm building this for someone and I want to stay legit as possible, or as legit as possible. For the SSD, we got a Crucial P2 NVMe M.2 SSD. It's 500GB one, so it should be perfectly fine to download the OS as well as a couple important apps or games. Hard drive, we got a 2TB Seagate Barracuda hard drive. You don't absolutely need a hard drive, but it's best to just have extra storage in case you want to download more stuff in the future, like games. Or for the CPU cooler, we got an NZXT Kraken X53. It's a 240mm AIO liquid cooler. Yes, you can find better value AIO liquid coolers, such as one from EK, one from Arctic, but he really likes the aesthetic of this NZXT cooler, and performance is not bad by any means. For the CPU, I don't know why I went through this last, but we got the AMD Ryzen 7 3700X, 8 cores, 16 threads on the Zen 2 architecture. And I guess we should just unbox it right now. I'm probably going to cut the camera there so I don't kill my battery, and then just take everything out of the box. And I'll probably switch to this camera as well. Okay, I switched to this camera. Let's unbox the motherboard. Take it out of the box. Okay, let's leave it inside this anti-static bag first because we don't want to damage anything. So what we need to take out of the box is the I/O shield, a SATA data cable, which looks like this. Hopefully it's focusing. What else? We don't need, we need an M.2 screw because we have an M.2 SSD. If you don't have an M.2 SSD, you don't need this screw. I don't really need this guide, but the manual would be handy. And what we have to do now is close up this box. Let's take out the motherboard from this electrostatic discharge bag. Hold it by the VRM heatsinks and the sides. Try not to touch any of the circuitry on the back. And we just have to close up the motherboard box. And just rest the motherboard on top of the box. We don't want to put it on top of the bag because the bag is not protected from static electricity. Put this to the side. Okay, now that we have the motherboard over here, let's unbox the rest of the parts. Like the power supply. For the power supply, this is a semi-modular unit, so most of the cables are already connected. We need this AC cable to plug into the wall. Actually, I stand corrected. This is a non-modular power supply, so cable management is going to be a little bit more difficult. All the cables are already attached, so you can see there's a huge jumble of cables here. Let me put this box down. Now let's unbox the CPU. Just cut this tape over here. And we're not going to be using the stock cooler because we have an AIO liquid cooler, but we're just going to grab out the CPU box and close up the box. Put this to the side. Alright, now we have the CPU box over here. Let's open up the hard drive. Just cut this tape over here. Take it out of the box, and I guess we can just leave it in this anti-static bag until we're ready to install it. So I'm going to put this underneath the table so it's just easier to grab later. Alright, the SSD. We're going to need this, so let's cut the tape on this box. And we can just leave it inside this plastic container for now. The RAM. We're going to need the RAM. Let's take this out of the plastic container. Just leave it like this. So we have the CPU, RAM, SSD, motherboard over there. We can unbox the graphics card a little bit later. I'll put this underneath the table. Okay, now let's install the CPU and the RAM as well as SSD onto the motherboard. We have to do this first before putting the motherboard inside the case. Alright, so we have the CPU inside this box. So let's take it out of the box. And you can see it's inside this plastic container. So let's take it out. Oh, before we take it out, make sure to only grab the CPU by the sides. Do not touch the pins on the bottom. You don't want to get your oils on that. Alright, so you can see the motherboard CPU socket. There's a triangle at the top left over here. Let's pull up this lever so we can get ready to drop in the CPU. Alright, so we're gonna locate the triangle on the bottom left corner of the CPU. It's down here, or you flip it to the back. You can see triangle's down there at the bottom left. So we're gonna have to line up the triangle to the triangle on the socket. So the CPU is gonna end up looking like this with the Ryzen logo on the side. So let's open up this container, grip the CPU by the sides, and just gently drop it into the socket. You don't have to apply any force at all, and you can wiggle it if you want to. And we just have to push this lever down. There you go. CPU is installed. Let's put this CPU box to the side because we don't need it anymore. So right now we can install the RAM. We're going to install the RAM in the second and fourth slots. Check your motherboard manual if it recommends you to use different slots. And we're using dual channel memory or 2 sticks, so we want to take advantage of dual channel memory. So open up this container with the RAM, and let's unclip this, the second and fourth RAM slots, as well as the bottom clips. So we have these clips unclipped, and keep in mind there are notches over here, so we have to align those notches with the notches on the RAM stick. So you can see that this does not align properly. Let me zoom in with the camera. Whereas this configuration or this orientation lines up. So just line it up with the slot. You can use 2 hands, press it down, you should hear a click. So I'm not going to talk for the next one so you can hear that click. There. That was pretty satisfying. Okay, so we have 2 RAM sticks in. Alright, SSD time. Remember to get the M.2 screw M.2 screws. Where are they? M.2 screws over here. So locate the M.2. If you have any M.2 SSDs, locate the M.2 slots on your motherboard. In this case, we have one right over here. We have to open up this packaging with the screw in there. Let me get my scissors. Okay, I believe this is the standoff, so we need to put the M.2 SSD on top of the standoff. So we're gonna move this to the 2280 spot because that is how long the SSD is. Let's open up this container. Carefully take out the M.2 SSD. So I just used my fingers to unscrew the standoff. Let's get the SSD and lower it down at a 30-degree angle. Put it into the slot. Press your finger down on it. Get your screwdriver. Get the screw that came inside the motherboard box and screw it down. I need to get a smaller screwdriver. This is too big. Alright, I got a smaller screwdriver. Let's just screw this M.2 SSD down to the standoff on the motherboard. There. And the SSD is installed. Okay, we also have a sticker on this chipset heatsink. So let's take this off. And if you see any other stickers on the motherboard, I suggest you take them off as well. Now let's just take a look at what we have for the motherboard. You can see that the SSD is installed as well as the CPU, and the Ryzen logo is on the side. SSD is down here and it's screwed on, and the RAM sticks are on the motherboard. So now we get onto the case. Let's move this motherboard to the side. I'm probably gonna just leave it over here with this stuff. I'm gonna rest it on the side like this. And let's take out this back panel over here. Just have to unscrew it. And we just have to slide it out and pull it out. Okay, so we have the back panel out, or I mean the side panel. So let's prop this up. And I just like to install the power supply first, just because. So let's grab the power supply from before, and this is non-modular, so all the cables are already plugged in. However, if you had a power supply that was not non-modular, so if it was semi-modular or fully modular, then you would want to have the CPU power cable, the PCIe power cable for the graphics card, as well as the motherboard 24 pin and a SATA power cable just to plug in any hard drives or SSDs to power them. So we just had to route this down here. Make sure to flip the power supply so that the fan is facing down, because there is a dust filter at the bottom of the case over here. So you can see this dust filter over here at the bottom of the case, and the power supply's fan is going to intake air from the bottom over here and then exhaust it out the back. So we want to make sure that it can breathe effectively. Okay, so just get the cables behind the power supply. Make sure to plug them in first, and then let's just put it in right here. Let's also take off the tempered glass side panel. We don't need this right now, so we just have 2 thumb screws over here, but I'm gonna use my screwdriver. Alright, I put the case on top of the table. I removed the tempered glass side panel as well as the back panel. They're just 2 thumb screws, and then you have to slide out the panels. Not too difficult. So let's pop out the front panel over here. Should just be able to pull it out from the bottom, and you can see that it's the hard drive cage over here. Let's take out this box. I believe there are all the screws and zip ties in here. Okay, yeah, we need these screws. There's an installation guide on how to install your parts inside this case, inside this box that came with this case, in case you're ever confused. Yeah, you can see how to remove the side panels as well as install your SSD power supply. I'm just going to refer to this manual to make sure I use the right screws, because I haven't used this case before, so I want to make sure I use the right screws. So let's install the hard drive into this hard drive bay down here. We got the hard drive inside this anti-static bag. Just open it up and remove it. So you can see the hard drive over here. This is the SATA data cable and SATA power cable. We just have to put it inside this sled and then put it in. Well, we should screw it in too. Alright, we just have to snap it in, and I did snap it in. It doesn't say we should screw it down, so I'm not going to screw it in the hard drive. It should be secure because it's snapped into place with this sled. So we just have to slide it back in there and then slide the hard drive in so that the ports are exposed on this side, and there does seem to be a hole over here on the cage, so we can get the SATA power cable as well as SATA data cable through this end. Kind of a strange approach, but I guess this will work. I mean, let's install the power supply now. So it says to use 4 of these screws. Let's see, we can focus 4 of these hexagonal screws. So let's take out the bag of screws and take out 4 of those screws. Four screws. Okay, let's put the rest of the screws back inside the bag for now. No, actually, let's take out the motherboard screws. So let's remove the rest of the screws. Motherboard screws, we're gonna need 9 of these screws to install inside the case. If you have a non-modular power supply, you don't have to worry about the cables because they're all already attached. But if you have a semi-modular power supply or a fully modular one, you're gonna have to attach the proper cables. So we're gonna need a SATA power cable. It looks like this. a 24-pin cable, which looks like this for the motherboard, CPU cable. We need two 8-pin ones for the graphics card, as well as the CPU cable. It should say CPU or EPS. So yeah, cable management is kind of going to be difficult for this non-modular unit. But you can see that there's a fan at the bottom of the power supply. There's also a dust filter at the bottom of this case. So it means that we should position the power supply where the fan is facing down here. So it'll intake fresh air through the dust filter and then out the back. So up through this fan and then out the back. So let's just line up the power supply down here, the fan facing down. Line it up with the screw holes. Might be easier to flip the case like this. And then just line up the screw holes and screw them down using the 4 hexagonal screws. Screw down the power supply and put one hand behind the power supply to hold it down, so when you're screwing it, it won't move around as much. I suggest you do opposite corners, but I already started this corner, too late. Alright, the power supply is installed. You can see all the cables over here. It's a mess. So let's flip it around back to this side, the main chamber of the case, and let's flip it onto the side. These cables are all the front panel cables that we're gonna have to plug into the motherboard a little bit later. Those front panel cables are for the case's front panel connectors, like the USB ports, headphone jack, a mic jack, power button, or that's not power button, this is the power button, I think. So yeah, all those cables that you see right here that are already pre-routed inside the case connect to over here for the case. So let's tuck them in. We don't need them right now. We just have to install the motherboard. Alright, so we have the inside of the case over here. Let's grab the motherboard from the VRM heatsinks as well as the sides. I almost forgot the IO shield. We have to put the IO shield at the back side of the case. Just open up the bag, take out the IO shield. Try not to cut yourself because the corners are pretty sharp. So just align the IO shield like this. So we just have to align the IO shield properly. Just position the IO shield like this with the text legible at the top and then prop it into position. So just have to lower down the motherboard. There are already pre-installed standoffs on this case, so that is great. And you just have to lower the motherboard and line it up with the IO in the IO shield in the back. There we go. The motherboard is on top of the standoffs, and we need to make sure that the standoffs are there so the motherboard doesn't get shorted. Grab these 9 small screws that we went over before, and if you don't remember what these screws are, or if you can't really see it from this video, go back to the manual from the PC case. So we just have to screw down the motherboard. You can see that there are 9 standoffs. So you see that there are 9 standoffs, 1 down here, 1 over here, 1 over here, 1 here, 1 in the middle, 1 in this side, 1 in the upper right, 1 over here, and 1 in the upper left. So we need to screw these 9 screws into those holes to secure the motherboard onto the case. I also suggest you get a magnetic tipped screwdriver because, as you can see over here, it's much more convenient because the tip is because the screw doesn't fall off from the tip, and you can easily just screw it into the motherboard without worrying about the screw falling out. Two more screws to go. Okay, you see that the screws are successfully screwed in. Let's zoom in a little bit. So we have that top screw over there. We have this screw over there. That screw. This one. That one. This one. That one in that corner. And that one over there. Let's prop this back up like this and then connect some cables. So let's do the front panel cables first, just because these are always a headache to connect. Alright, this blue tip cable is for the USB ports at the top of the case over here. So let's route this through a hole over here. Or let's actually route this down through this hole over here and flip the case over. So just route the cable over. Flip this around and you can see that there is a notch at the bottom. There's a notch at the bottom of this connector, so we have to line this up with the notch on the motherboard header. So I'm gonna have to route this cable under like this. Oh, this is a pain. Now let's route the HD audio cable. This is for the front panel audio. It's usually towards this side of the case, so let's route it underneath this hole here to the main compartment of the case. And we are at the main compartment. Let's see, it says J-odd1 over here at the bottom left side of the case, and there's a missing pin over here on the connector. There's a missing pin right here on the connector, so you have to make sure that that lines up with the header on the motherboard. So we just have to plug it in, and then tuck in the cable because we don't want to see it. Now we got the front panel connectors. These are super annoying. Got the hard drive LED reset switch, power LED, as well as power switch. I suggest you pick up the motherboard manual over here, and let's take a look. So here you can see the front panel connector locations. You can pause the video over here if you want to take a look at it, but we need to plug in the power LED, power switch, hard drive LED, and reset switch. It should say JFP, so we need to plug in these cables over there. Power LED plus, then minus. I like the text facing the bottom just so we don't have to see it. So for power LED, we got plus, then on the left, then minus on the right. Plug that right next to it on the top row. Okay, and we can just route the cables over here. So you can see that this is pretty confusing on how to do it. If you just follow the manual, it should be pretty simple to do, and all the cables are correctly labeled. It's really difficult to show on video, so I'll link a video below if you're having trouble with doing that. So let's plug in some of the other power cables. So we got the CPU power cable. Let's route it through the back side. Let's route it around up here so we can plug it into the motherboard and just route it through like this. Then let's flip around the case. And as you can see, we need to plug in the CPU power cable up there. There is a clip over here. We need to line it up with the notch at the top. Plug it in. And all we have is an A pin. You should hear it snap into place. And when you tug at it, it should not get loose because the clips are in there. So, we have the CPU power cable in. And we can just cable manage a little bit by pulling it. And then we'll tuck it in over here, and then we'll use zip ties a little bit later. Motherboard 24-pin cable. Let's grab that. Where is that? It should be the thickest, fattest cable over here. So you can see this motherboard 24-pin. Let's route it through here. So you can see that there's a hole over here in the case. Route it around, and here you can see this 24-pin connector on the motherboard. Right there. And there's a clip over here as well as a notch over here, so flip it around, then plug it in like so. And then you should hear a slight click, and then we can tuck this in because we don't need to see this ugly cable. You need a SATA power cable. So SATA power cable looks kind of like this. Focus. Okay, it looks like this. So we need to route it around right here. So there's a hole over here. We can route this SATA power cable through here and then plug it into the hard drive. Oh yeah, and there's also a notch on this SATA power cable, so you have to line up the notch with the hard drive. It only goes in one way, so if it's not this way, then it's the other way. It is this way. So plug it in, and it should be pretty snug. Then we just have to tuck in this cable over here because we don't need it. Let's go back to this SATA data cable that we got from the motherboard box earlier. We just have to take out one of them. So take it out. So this is what the SATA data cable looks like. This is to transfer data from the hard drive to your motherboard, so you can actually use your hard drive. So let's plug in one end to the hard drive. You should hear a click, and then I guess we just have to route it around under here, back through this hole. right around through the back side of the case, and then straight through here, this hole, and you should hear a click over here. So let me do it again. You just plug it into the motherboard SATA port. There. Okay. Now we move on to the AL liquid cooler. AL liquid cooler. Okay, so let's take this out of the box. Let's take this out. Okay, so I already got out most of the cables. We need this USB 2.0 cable for RGB control, the SATA cable for the pump, the two 120mm AirP fans, the mounting hardware, as well as the AIO itself. So you know, I already kind of unboxed this earlier just to get everything ready. I don't need the manual because I'm already pretty familiar with it. So let me put this box down here. Alright, let's take out the AirP fans first. So we have the NXT AirP fans. These are 120mm versions. I also already wiped off the thermal paste on the cold plate of the cooler, so you can see there's no pre-applied thermal paste. If you bought this NXT AIO brand new and you wanted to install it and you didn't want to apply thermal paste, it usually comes with pre-applied thermal paste, so you don't have to apply your own. But let me go grab some thermal paste so I can apply some. Generally speaking, your own thermal paste should outperform the stock thermal paste that comes with most CPU coolers. I'm going to use Arctic MX4 because I just have some, just for that little better thermal conductivity. Since this is an AMD system, we need to get the AM4 bracket, so we need to switch that out. It's going to look like this. This like wide one. Okay, so we need the long screws with the washers. So this is what they look like. These are just like really long screws, and there's a washer at the top. So we need 8 of those because there are 8 mounting holes. Alright, so we have 8 of these longer screws with washers in between them. 4 of these thumb screws to mount the cooler onto the bracket, and the AM4 bracket itself. This SATA cable for the pump cable, as well as this USB 2.0 cable, Arctic MX4, the 2 NXT AirP fans, as well as the radiator. There's the case. So let's position ourselves. So I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to install the radiator first. So first off, I'm going to put the radiator at the front because it won't fit at the top. I'm going to put the tubes at the bottom of the case, just like this. So the tubes are going to be exiting from the radiator at the bottom of the case. This is the ideal configuration. Gamers Nexus showed this on their YouTube channel for the ideal noise levels, because if you have the tubes at the top, then air bubbles are going to eventually build up at the pump, and we don't want air bubbles. So yeah, we're going to mount the radiator at like this at the front with the tubes exiting from the bottom. As for the fans, I'm going to have them in the push configuration just because it doesn't really matter push or pull. So we're gonna put the fans in front of the radiator in push position. So we're gonna get fresh air from this side of the case and then push that fresh air through the radiator inside the case. So we've got the radiator over here. I think we can just mount the fans like this on this side. I think we can mount the fans like this in the push configuration to push fresh air through the radiator. Or actually, I just want to make this case look a little bit more full because it looks kind of empty in the front. So I'm gonna move the fans from this side of the bracket towards in here, so it just takes up, so this way it'll just take up more space inside the case, so it'll look more full rather than the fans being on this side where it just looks kind of empty and weird. Let me position the fans. I'm gonna route the fans through a hole at the top over here just for cable management reasons, and then this fan over here I can route the power cable. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have the fans, the radiator right behind it, and then we're going to use those long screws with the washers and just screw them in like this. We have to make sure they line up and all. And let's do that right now. I'm holding the radiator at the back, and I'm hoping this lines up with the radiator, the fan. If it doesn't, you can try adjusting the radiator. Okay, there. We got one corner of one fan in. So let me hold it down and then screw in this fan, this corner over here. So we just have to get the bottom fan in first, line it up with the radiator properly. It's gonna be quite difficult. Okay, it's going in. I got 2 corners of the bottom fan in, so I just have to line up this fan properly. Let me push it in a little more. Alright. I think it should be lined up now, so let me screw in the rest of this bottom fan. And let me hold the radiator at the back. Alright, we're getting the long screw with the washer in between, and then holding the radiator down with the other hand and screwing down the fan. You just have to make sure the fan lines up with the radiator holes. So if it's not screwing in, you have to adjust it a little bit. Okay, so we got 8 screws in. So you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws with the washer in between. This is how we secure the fans and the radiator to the case itself. So you can see this is how we did it. Tubes exiting from the bottom for optimal noise performance. And I already peeled the plastic on the water block. So yeah, this is how we're just gonna line it up like this to the case. Take off this plastic and take off this Intel bracket. So we take off this Intel bracket. No one uses Intel anymore. Gotta use the AM4 bracket. Wait, turn it counterclockwise. Just position it in, turn it counterclockwise. So here we have it. And oh, I forgot. How did I forget? We need to get the AM4 standoffs for the backplate. Alright, so let's get back the bag from the NZXT cooler. Alright, so we have to get 4 of these standoffs. They look like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this is what they look like. These are for the AM4 bracket. Let me get closer. So we're gonna remove this stock AM4 bracket over here. Remove these 4 screws, and then we're gonna use our fingers to screw this in place of those, like that. Unscrew the top part first. Got the right screw out. Okay, so this just falls off like that. And so leave the bottom part on so we can hold the back plate up, the AM4 back plate. So if we flip this around, you can see that there is a back plate back here. So this is being held by those clips. This was being held by these clips, but instead of this holding down this back plate, we're gonna use these standoffs instead. Oh, and by the way, this back plate came with the motherboard. It comes with all AMD motherboards. I wonder what I just knocked down. Oh, I knocked down my thermal paste. Okay, so you just have to twist it with your fingers. So just twist it into the bracket. So just twisting it, like, see right there. Now that these 2 are on, we can unscrew this. And unscrew this. By the way, you should keep these just in case you ever want to use the stock cooler, because the stock cooler hooks onto these clips over here. So let's get the rest of these standoffs onto the bracket. So you can see right now we have these standoffs in. So what we're gonna do is put thermal paste on the CPU just enough so that it covers the entire heat spreader of the CPU. Then we're gonna mount this pump block just like this. We're gonna use these fat thumb screws and screw the cooler on like that. Okay, so let's get the Arctic MX4. Unscrew this, and I just have to put a pea-sized amount in the middle. If you're using the pre-applied thermal paste, you don't have to worry about this step, but I just want to use my own thermal paste. Ryzen CPUs have slightly larger heat spreaders, and I just sort of dabbed it around because there's a little bit of excess. And that amount of thermal paste looks like a little bit too much, but it doesn't matter because Arctic MX4 in particular is not electrically conductive, so even if it spills over, it's not a big issue. It's a very minimal thermal effect if you have too much paste. In my opinion, it's better to have more paste than not enough, because you want coverage throughout the entire heat spreader of the CPU. You don't want any hot spots where thermal paste is not covering. So got thermal paste. I mean, I got isopropyl alcohol in the cover filter, just wiping off the cold plate of the cooler to make sure that it's spotless. And the NZXT logo can be flipped around in 30-degree increments, so you don't really need to have it in a specific orientation. But I like to have it so that the tubes are exiting from the right side. It just looks, in my opinion, a little bit cleaner. So you just have to drop it in, line the holes on the bracket of the AM4 bracket for the water block onto the holes of the standoffs, or I mean onto the standoffs. So you just have to line it up, and the mounting pressure will automatically, or not automatically, the mounting pressure will just spread around the thermal paste, so you don't have to worry about spreading around. You can spread it around if you want to, but I'm not going to do that. So you can see that I put this thumb screw down there, so screw in one corner lightly. Do them in opposite corners, so I'm gonna screw in the top right corner, then screw in the left corner just a little bit, and then I'm gonna screw in the top left corner just a little bit. You can also use a screwdriver for these, but I just like to use my fingers because why not? So I screwed in the top left corner just a little bit, lift these tubes up, and put in the last thumb screw. And now that I got all four in, we just have to tighten them. So let's tighten two corners at one time. There's that thumb screw over there that I'm just tightening down. For extra mounting pressure, if you don't trust your fingers, you can just use a screwdriver and just finish it off a little bit by adding a little bit more mounting pressure. Don't over tighten because you can get this kind of stuck in there, so if you ever want to remove it, it might take a little bit more force. But generally, more mounting pressure will yield lower thermals. Alright, cable time for this AIO. So this one connects to the pump block. This is a micro USB cable, and it goes to USB 2.0. So there's a USB 2.0 port at the bottom of the motherboard. This one attaches to a SATA power cable to power the pump, as well as this goes to the pump header of the motherboard. This goes to the SATA. This goes to a SATA port from the power supply. One of those cables, and this part attaches to the pump block of the NZXT cooler. This part is for NZXT RGB coolers. NZXT RGB products. We don't need this. It attaches up here. Be sure to follow the manual that NZXT provides if you're a little bit confused. So we just gotta line up this cable. It should only go in one way, so just be mindful of that. Okay, so it went in. We need to plug in this pump cable. It should look like this with a notch over here. So we need to find the pump block. It should say pump block or CPU fan with that header that says pump fan. There's a notch over there, so just push it in, and then we can route this cable through here. Route this up to this hole over here where the CPU power cable went, up in that hole. This one over there. So let's just route these two cables through over there. And you can see that we routed the two cables through this side. So we need this NZXT RGB cable, we don't need this. We can just route this over here and zip tie it later. This SATA SATA power cable, we need to plug this into a SATA power cable that we plugged in earlier. So there's one for the power supply. We can just plug it into any SATA cable. Make sure to line up the notch, and I think it should go. SATA cable is to power the pump for the AIO liquid cooler. This USB cable to the top part through this CPU power cable part, and let's plug that in. Flip this around so it plugs in right here, left of that fat cable that we plugged in earlier. Follow the NZXT manual if you're a little bit confused. So it just plugs in. It just plugs in like that. So we got the USB cable as well as the pump cable. So we'll just route that up through the top there. Flip this around. So we got this USB 2.0 cable. This thick one over here, let's route this through. Let's route this through under here. So here's the USB 2.0 cable. This one, that one over there. We need to route it. We need to route this cable from there to one of these ports over here. And we'll just do cable management a little bit later. So now we should plug in the fans. All right. This rear fan cable, we can route this over through one of these holes. So let's just route it through the top hole. See this fan cable right here? It has a notch. Make sure to keep that in mind. And locate the system fan header. It should be different for every motherboard. But this one says sysfan 3. Make sure to line up the notch and just push it in. And then it should just connect pretty easily. We'll just tuck in the cable a little bit so it's less ugly. And there we go. We plugged in one of the fan cables. And that fan cable was yet again for this fan at the back that came pre-installed in the case. Y splitter over here for the CPU fan cables. So these two fans are gonna attach to this Y splitter, and then we're gonna plug in this end to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. If you don't know where the CPU fan header is, it should have a label on the motherboard or the motherboard manual. You can always refer to that. So we routed this fan cable through over here, and we also have the other one over here, so we can attach this to this Y splitter. Yet again, there's a notch, so make sure to keep that in mind. So both these fans are plugged into the splitter, and then we just have to plug this end into the CPU fan header, which hopefully we can route this under here. Okay, yeah, we can route this under here. Alright, this is so convenient. So, got this cable routed around up here. We just have to plug it into the CPU fan header right there. So, let me do that right now. So, routed this through. You can see right there, it is pretty clean. We just routed the cable through and then tucked it in back into the hole that it came through. So you can see there are two screws over here. Let's unscrew this. Unscrew this. And then remove this PCIe slot cover. Then we're going to put it in this slot, the top slot that's reinforced, and it's also going to be an X16 slot, so you get better performance. Theoretically, if you use the top slot, always use the top slot first for your graphics card. So we're going to remove the second and third PCIe slot covers. Your screwdriver, unscrew these screws, and the slot covers are going to come loose. Make sure to keep these screws because we're going to use them to screw in the graphics card. So just remove these slot covers and keep these slot covers just in case you ever want to sell the case. So we have the RTX 3070 in here, and sure enough, it kind of barely fits in here. Oh my gosh, dang. GPU power cables routed around first. So let's flip this back around. Locate the cables from your power supply that say PCIe. If you didn't plug them in, then you should have plugged them in. So we need two 8-pins just for the 3070. In your case, it could be a little bit different. You might need a 6-pin PCIe cable. You might need an 8-pin one, so you just put these two together. Or you might need an 8 plus 6-pin configuration or an 8 plus 8-pin configuration. So we're gonna route these two PCIe cables through to this side of the case. So just route them through this hole. Alright, so we routed them through. Let's not use that. So you can see there is a hole down here as well as a hole over there. I feel like it would be more attractive, it would just look better if we use this hole. So let's push back these cables and then route these PCIe power cables up through this hole. If you have any covers on the graphics card, make sure to remove them. In this case, there's one over here, as well as one on the PCIe connector part of the graphics card, so just remove that so we can expose the PCIe connector. So make sure to unclip this, so push this out like that. Let me demonstrate it just again. So push this out like that. And then we just have to grab the graphics card, move the tubes a little bit for the AIO if they're in the way. Okay, so we move the tubes just a little bit. So line up the graphics card with the PCIe slot. So you can see I'm holding the graphics card like this, and line it up with the PCIe slot in the back. So just have to lower it down a little bit, and then we're going to have to make sure it's lining up with the PCIe slot, and then we're gonna push in, and you should hear a click like that, and then that clip should go back. So we have the graphics card installed. We get to screw this down on this side. So get the screws that we disconnected earlier. Screw it down. Alright, we screwed in one side, now just screw in the top over here. It should look like this. Just screw it down. Now we put back this cover over here. It could kind of hold up the graphics card. Okay, so we gotta plug in these cables. So connect these cables into the graphics card. So there are two 8-pin parts. So we need to connect this part like so into an 8-pin block, and then plug it into one side. And there we go. So it plugged in, and then we can zip tie these a little bit later. But just tuck in those cables as much as possible. And yeah, I think we're pretty much done with building the PC. And Zixie's tubing is rigid and it's pretty reinforced, so I'm not really worried at all about it bending like this. We got the power connectors, we got the CPU power connector, USB pump header, 24-pin. We got the fans plugged in, CPU fan plugged in, GPU's already said it was plugged in. SSD, got the RAM, coolers installed. I think we just gotta work on actually, we shouldn't do cable management first. We should turn this thing on to see if it works first. So let me turn off my cameras, clear the desk. All right, now that we are back, I got the AC cable for the power supply. This came inside the power supply box. So just plug this into the back side of the power supply, and plug this side into the wall outlet or into a surge protector. I also got a monitor plugged in, as well as a keyboard and mouse. Let me turn on the mouse. So go to the back of the power supply. Okay, there's a switch back there. Right now it's on the circle. Bring it over to the line so that we can turn on power. And let's hope this thing works. Turn on the power supply. Oh, and by the way, it might reboot a couple times. Just be patient. So check that all the fans are spinning. So I don't suggest poking your finger in fans, but I like doing that, and all the fans are spinning. Graphics card fans are spinning. You can just rotate it to see if they're spinning, and they indeed are. So yeah, this thing is probably gonna reset a couple times. That's usual with new AMD Ryzen systems. So it's gonna reboot a couple times, and eventually, if everything goes right, we should get a display signal. So we just have to be patient. Right now I see a red light on the motherboard and nothing's showing up, so I don't know. Let's just see the motherboard to see if there's anything wrong with this, or if I'm just not being patient enough. Eventually I'm hoping something's gonna pop up on the screen, but I don't know. To pass the time, let's just check out the motherboard manual. Where are the booting devices not detected or fail? So make sure the monitor is connected properly. Maybe this monitor is not getting enough power from this USB-C port, so I'm gonna switch it over to a different USB-C power supply. Unplug this cable and plug it back in. Okay. Oh, look, we're getting something. It says HDMI 1. Okay, Arsenal Gaming, this is looking good. Let me flip the camera around. Alright. What? Let me restart the computer. And turn it back on. I'm gonna spam the delete key to get into BIOS. I think it said something. It was like delete F11. Oh, wait. What the heck is this? What the? Why is there some weird artifacting? Okay, so it found the Windows drive. That's perfectly fine with me, honestly. Next, install now. So, I guess we're just gonna go into installing Windows. We're gonna skip the BIOS. I don't even know why. But yeah, so I have a product key, so I'm gonna put this in right now. If you don't have a product key, you can just click I don't have a product key. Alright, so Windows is activated. Click I accept license terms. Next, install Windows only. Let's do it on this drive 1, which is 500 gigabytes for the SSD, because SSDs are faster. That's why we got an SSD to install the operating system on it. So yeah, we chose the SSD to install it on. And right now it just says installing Windows, getting files ready. You just have to be patient. Alright, now we are over here. So US, because I'm in the US, but just choose whatever you want to do. US keyboard, wherever you live, I mean. Skip. Yeah, I don't have internet to port for that. Limited setup. I don't want to log into Microsoft. They can always just do it themselves if they want to. No name, please. Oh my god, user. No, actually, yeah, I'll just do user. You can always just change the name later. No password. Just click next, or you can do whatever you want to. You can always just turn this on later. No, I don't want any of this. Nope, I don't want advertising. I don't want diagnostic data to send to Microsoft. No. No, I don't want Cortana. Waste of precious research, honestly, in making Cortana. Alright, so this is going to take several minutes according to Microsoft, so we just have to be a little bit patient. Wait for Windows to fully install. And then we go on to drivers, and then we go back into BIOS to set the XMP profile for the RAM. So yeah, we just have to wait for this. And we also have to cable manage everything. And stress test, benchmark it to make sure it all works. Alright, so we're in Windows. Let me disconnect the Windows USB drive. So let me plug in this USB flash drive that I already installed all the drivers on. If you don't already have the drivers installed, you're going to have to connect the PC to either Ethernet or Wi-Fi, and then obviously go into MSI's website and download the drivers from there. But I already have all the drivers installed on this USB flash drive, so I'm going to plug this into a USB port. And it should say new volume over there. So we go into our files, new volume. So I have all the drivers over here already installed onto the flash drive. Let me copy these onto the local disk C drive. Continue. Create format hard disk partitions. Now we can clear that. Oh wait. Oh, we also have to initialize the hard drive. So initialize the hard drive. Because the hard drive that we plugged in, we have to initialize it first so we can actually use it. So now it says unallocated over here, so right click it, new simple volume, click next. Yes, let's just call it letter E for the drive, and I don't know, we'll just call it new volume. Finish, and then it should format, and there we go, the hard drive. It says formatting, and now it says healthy. Now the hard drive is good to go, we can use the hard drive. But what I came here to do was actually, where's the USB flash drive that I plugged in? New volume D? Oh, it's new volume D. Yeah, I actually came here to format new volume D, because that's where all the drivers were installed, and I don't need that in there anymore. So let me eject new volume D. I already jumped the drivers into the C folder. I mean the C disk. Okay, so here we have all the drivers. Let me make a folder, new folder. Call it drivers. Oh, I forgot the NVIDIA drivers. How did I forget that? Okay, drop this into drivers. Continue. Where did drivers go? Okay, so extract all for this chipset driver from AMD. Open up the file folder. Run the program that AMD provides. So click next, and then we just have to run the program. And while this is waiting, I'm gonna go to my other PC and download the NVIDIA drivers onto this flash drive and just plug this in. I don't have Wi-Fi right now. I don't have Ethernet, so I'm just installing into this and just dropping it into here. So yeah, we're gonna install all the AMD drivers. Let's click install, and yeah, we'll just let it run. Alright, now it says the software's installed, so just click restart, and then it's gonna restart. Right, local disk, drivers. So we did the chipset drivers, now we have to do the audio drivers, extract all. Run the program, which is right here, setup, install, and it might tell us to restart again, so we just have to restart. I'll restart later. Finish. Okay, that one's done. Now we have to do this one. Extract all. Come on, hurry up. Don't have all day. Next. Next. And I'll just restart now. Drivers, the last one. Was it this one? LAN drivers. This is for Ethernet. Open it. Setup. Yes. Next. And let's just restart now. Restart anyway. Alright, I'm back now. Let's plug in the USB flash drive from the NVIDIA drivers that I installed onto that flash drive. So let's go back into this flash drive. Copy this into our drivers folder. Now we can format this flash drive again. Okay, now we go back into our C drive, drivers, run the NVIDIA driver program, the game ready drivers, because this is primarily going to be for gaming. So we just have to wait for this to install. Alright, now let's just install the driver. They can install GeForce Experience later. Next, we'll just do the Express recommended installation. Oh yeah, and the screen might turn off a couple times. But that's normal, it's just installing the drivers. So close, and we'll close this. Let's go into settings and go to power settings. Advanced power settings. Oh no, actually. Okay, go into advanced power settings. Let's do AMD Ryzen High Performance, and you can double check it. AMD Ryzen High Performance. Now let's restart and then go into BIOS. Spam the delete key, or it's usually F1. I think in this motherboard it's F11, but usually delete key works. So when you're restarting, just spam your delete key on your keyboard and you should get into BIOS pretty easily. Alright, I somehow got into BIOS. I just spammed the delete key. So let's go back to AXMP. Let's just try profile 1. Precision Boost Overdrive, let's enable it. Oh, over here, top right. Exit. Let's see, AXMP profile 1, Precision Boost Overdrive enabled, yes. Alright, let's check our memory, and it is running at 3600 megahertz. That is awesome to see. And the CPU base clock 3.6 gigahertz, that looks fine. And it says RTX 3070, yes, everything looks fine. Now let's update the BIOS for the motherboard, just so they get the best RAM compatibility and everything. So I already downloaded the BIOS file onto this flash drive, so I forgot to extract all. Extract all. And there we go. There's the BIOS file. So we just have to turn this off, and then I'll turn it back on, and then spam the delete key. Alright, I don't know why I literally can't get into BIOS, so we get into settings, update and security, recovery. Let's try this way. Restart now. Yes, okay, good. I want to flash the BIOS and update it. Oh yeah, and I already plugged the USB flash drive with the BIOS file into a USB port at the back of the motherboard. Oh, okay, so I went into the files of the USB flash drive. I already extracted everything, so I think this is it. Select the file, yes. It's updating, so I'm not gonna touch anything, not gonna turn it off, and hopefully there's no power outage or thunderstorm, because then it would just brick the motherboard. So I'm just gonna wait for this to fully update, and then we're gonna work on cable management shortly after this is updated. And I can't really benchmark this or stress test this yet because we don't have a Wi-Fi card yet, and Ethernet is really inconvenient for me to try out like wiring it. Okay, now it's time for cable management. So let's get the build over here, flip it around to the jungle in the back, and we need to tie everything down. Camera closer. So we're gonna use the zip ties that came in the box with the P300A case. We don't really need anything else than this. Zip ties are pretty good. Route these cables down here towards the right side of the case, and I guess we can just tuck them in over here and pull these cables in, zip tie them, and tug the cables a little bit more, make them tighter. Right here for all these cables. This way? Oh no, other way. Make sure not to cut any cables. Alright, so I cut that part over there. And just have to pull these cables down here and make them look neater. And let me cut this excess part. The secret to cable management is using a bunch of zip ties. That is definitely the key. Alright, so still looks kind of messy over here. Maybe another zip tie will help us keep this together. So you can see there's like a rat's nest of cables over here. We can just stuff these in here. Stuff these into the power supply basement. This motherboard 24-pin cable and SATA cable can kinda be routed with this Velcro. Perfect. So over here you can see that we routed the CPU power cable as well as the cables like the pump cable as well as the USB cable for the NZXT cooler. So we routed them all over here and use a zip tie as well as a zip tie over there. And it kind of gets a little bit messy here, but I want to leave these SATA cables exposed in case they ever want to just attach extra accessories and stuff. The Molex cable and other cables are tucked in over there. These cables are the front panel cables that are just routed over here. There's Velcro, zip tie over here, and over here we got some Velcro action going on there, as well as this twist tie. And yeah, you can see over here looks pretty clean, I would say. So let's reattach the front panel, or yeah, the front mesh panel. Just have to line up the holes and then push it in. We can put back the rear panel, or I mean the side panel. This, we just have to slide it in. So this is what the inside of the build looks like. You can see the GPU power cables over here. They are routed around like this, and I use twist ties all the way down there. And the motherboard 24-pin is tucked in over there. There's that fan header tucked in around there. These are kind of good, not interfering with the VRM heatsink over there. I might use a twist tie or a zip tie over there to tighten them up. Alright, let's install the Wi-Fi card. I have a TP-Link, Bluetooth 5.0 and Wi-Fi 6 Wi-Fi card. Here's the box. So inside we have the two antennae and the Wi-Fi card itself. Let's take this out. And there's also a USB 2.0 cable, I think. Alright, I got a Phillips head screwdriver. Let's take out this PCIe slot cover. So we're going to install it in the X4 slot at the bottom of the PC. So let's gonna be this slot right here. So we're gonna take out the 6th PCIe slot cover. So flip over the PC, unscrew this. So here's the Wi-Fi card itself, the TP-Link Wi-Fi card. I think we need to plug in USB over here. So yeah, this plugs into an X4 slot. You can see the 2 antennae stubs over here. And it's a pretty big heatsink for such a small card. So let's plug this in over here. Just have to line it up and then insert it like so. Then we screw it down. Let's plug in that USB cable. So plug in over here.